That's what you do, passing around. Yeah. That's the same, I guess. Your live streaming puts it on your YouTube page.
Yep. And it's saying it's gonna happen.
It is.
Yeah.
Nothing plug around somewhere there. Folks, there's some
The weight thing.
budget scenarios there, a couple different ones if anybody wants to see. There's 2 different pages there. I can pass them down if there's enough for everybody.
No.
So with that, I don't know if either of you had a chance to pop into the.
Yeah, the
forecast
link
spreadsheet.
Yeah,
This is
we'll
available
look at them, so.
to anyone that clicks on it from the agenda. Kevin tried to create a nice summary tab. Through here, behind that, there's a whole bunch of other spreadsheets, just trying to work through, figure out what that would look like, so,
I went through the summary, but I didn't get, okay, with
yeah.
the new to Google.
So the idea here is all that does is rolls up. So we have the line item and input controls, that's all the line item detail
Yeah,
for
okay.
what shows premium, standard, and for the phase 1 approach. And I said, well, it would help to just have a summary roll up of each of those categories. So that's what this does. And we can talk about what's down below that Thomas and I worked on earlier this week, or was it earlier this week or was it last week? It was like last week. I don't remember. It's all blur.
Bunch together.
Yeah, blow that up just a little bit, can you, Kevin?
Andy's got it, so
I can attempt to without losing the, see if it goes off the page, there we go.
so this just gives you the summary of the total operating expense. So
Well,
And you-
operating capital, yeah.
operating and capital, yep, sorry, debt service, facilities, each of those roll up. We can get into the details of them later, but I just kind of want to summarize this by saying, you know, your current expense, which is row 153 down there. So collectively, we're currently spending $1.8 million, we'll call it. So all of our options do end up costing more initially. And you can see the breakdown is by Damascus and Newcastle, those amounts. So scrolling further down. The standard option, which is row G. That's the most cost effective option. Doesn't give us the same number, same amount of equipment or. Let's drag that down, I guess.
Yeah, I'm trying to lock that, see if I knock the first 2.
There you go.
Keep going down here.
Yeah, and so this gives you an idea of the estimated cost breakdown with interlocal agreement. And there's a lot of assumptions in these numbers. And we'll talk about some of those, stuff like, at least in this initial assumption, it was that any new equipment we were gonna buy as the towns was basically just divided by 5. So we get a lease for a 5-year or rent to own for 5 years. So the cost of the new equipment wouldn't be, you know, $75,000. It would be 75 divided by 5.
Yeah, okay, you're.
So that adds up in that sense. Anything that was used, we initially said, let's buy outright. And anything we rent would just be a full cost too. So those first year, buying a bunch of used equipment has a pretty high price tag. And so what Thomas suggested was, well, why don't you go the same route for a short-term borrowing for used equipment too? Make it a 3-year purchase.
Okay.
So these numbers right now reflect this 5-year approach. You scroll up or over to the consider these. Thomas K's suggestions, and you change that to yeah. You can see the numbers go down. So you scroll down, so the numbers go down. So now the standard approach, and so you understand like a lot of what this initial cost is associated with equipment purchase.
Right.
But if
yeah.
we were divided by 3, can you go up first a little more, Andy? You can see the cost based on the possible shares. Damascus saves money in that assumption, and Newcastle has a $400,000 increase. So that's the possible share was based on the average of town-owned roads for each of the two towns, and maintenance roads, which are our winter maintenance roads, which are state aid roads. So we have to plow all of our town roads and our state aid roads, but we have to maintain our town roads. So it's the average of the miles per town. That's what that 36 to 60.
Okay, that's where you get the cost share from,
That's
the
the
percentage. base.
That was
Yeah.
that was sort of where I think we got
Yeah.
to when we were initially
discussed, I'm
talking
sure.
about it.
Yeah,
But until we saw the numbers associated with it,
yeah.
it's like, sure, that sounds great. However, under this scenario, that's a kind of a difficult pill to swallow for Newcastle. Not that it's not something we can
I
approach.
like that negative flag.
I know you do.
That's-
Yeah.
The premium and standard,
Yeah, so the premium level of service we established was kind of continuing the way the two towns have two contracts now, one for downtown. Each of them have a downtown contract and each have a roads contract. And so when you got a dedicated crew on your main streets for both communities dealing with that, a more standard approach would be you got one crew and sidewalks will get done, but it might be, you know, after the storm or as they get through a route, depending on the snow intensity, they can get through a route and maybe pick up some of the sidewalks, but the sidewalks wouldn't be an equal priority where they are right now. So they'd still get done, just not at the same time. That's not unique, and that's how a lot of public works departments will typically do theirs. If folks travel.
if there's a slip and fall, whether it's premium or standard, you're still gonna be held accountable legally, right?
I mean, the main claims law exists and, you know, unless we're negligent in something, I mean, if there's a defect in a sidewalk, you know, ice on it, they've established in the courts is not considered a defect in the wintertime. I mean, we'll still be treating them, still be trying to do it to the best of the resources and the ability we have. But that was kind of the big difference between the two. The phase one came up at one of the meetings we had in Newcastle. Someone suggested instead of going all in at once with either standard or premium, could you step into it? So phase one would, you know, that's is assumed here, plays out with just taking on that downtown contract first, smaller crew, more, you know, less bigger equipment, you know, stuff you can kind of rent versus having to buy up front to deal with the downtown contract, and it's not doesn't appear to be a very popular one among contractors to bid on.
No, not
as
at
it
all.
is. So I thought that would give a core crew of about 5 or 6 people to be able to deal with the core downtown work.
And so this now is toggled for Thomas's suggestion. He had an additional suggestion which shows up down below. Oh,
This one right now is toggled for the 3-year, or sorry, the,
the 3-year for used equipment, 5-year.
3 and
for-
5, yeah, so not outright and then 5, okay.
Yeah, and so when you scroll down, Thomas had another suggestion, and I'll let him carry this one. Don't mind,
So,
I need to back out of it.
a little, just go back up a little bit, just a little bit for only.
The Keith Damer Scott has done going down on that.
well, it brings those numbers into a little bit more of
Yeah.
a realistic spot. So the original cost share standard we have up top there, I believe that's the difference from the current expense. What we're currently expending out of our budgets, correct?
The share? Oh, further up is what we're spending, and so the difference shows up down below. So right now we're spending, so can you go down a little further?
I'm gonna back out of this so I can see more.
Okay. I couldn't get all of that to show up.
And these figures don't take into account the purchase of the land and the buildings?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, just let Thomas finish his thoughts here real quick, folks.
So I think what Thomas had suggested, so if you scroll up, Andy, a little further, a little further, a little further. Keep going, it's way up here. Right there is the split, current split is 817,000.
Yeah.
Is what Damer Scott spends on its public works and contracts. Newcastle spends $975,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's over a 3-year period?
No, that's every year.
Current,
That's our current. So the total current for the two towns is $1.8 million for the two towns. And what this standard would say up there is 2.15 is what it would cost to do this project. So it is more than by almost $400,000 or $355,000.
Okay,
So it would cost more to do the standard in the first year. And if you scroll down, what Thomas was suggesting was. And sorry, stop. Under the cost share formula that was proposed in the interlocal agreement as Appendix A. Was the 35.91 to 64 split based on, that's town roads and state aid roads, the share of work for the two on average. And so therefore Damascotta has more or fewer roads than Newcastle does, therefore Newcastle should have a greater share of this. And if you were to apply that formula to this project, Damascotta's bill would technically come down by 45,000 and Newcastle's would go up by 401,000. So we'd have a 1.377 million.
Mhm.
Damascotta would have 771. The challenge there is I'm not sure I could get, I don't think it's gonna be particularly popular.
might be a hard sell for you.
Yeah, it's a little easier, it would be a lot easier if both of these were cost savings
Yeah.
for both towns in that first year. But we'll talk about longer term
Yeah,
benefits in a
absolutely.
minute. But okay, so then Thomas suggested, well, what if some of that share, such as equipment and facilities, for example, were split that way? Is the need for the space and the need for the equipment,
Mhm.
if they were shared by that cost share formula, but the admin and personnel, because the idea is you want them to be fluid and
I
all
see.
have the same,
Okay.
would be a 50-50 split. So you'd have the cost of equipment and facilities be part of that cost share. And the admin would be a 50-50 split. So what would happen is Damascotta would have the 985,000, Newcastle would have 1.2. And if you scroll further down, you'll see what the ask of each community is another almost $200,000.
Right, okay.
So
Yeah,
you're
next
helping
year, so-
share that cost and going forward.
And that's under the 50-50 plan, not the regular.
That is
Well,
a
it's-
combination of the two.
Common.
The 50-50 is tied to share of admin and personnel. The 36 to 64 is based on the cost for equipment and facilities.
When the other.
Makes sense.
If I could-
Do this, did they?
If I could just, point of order quick, just to make sure that the committee had the chance, not want to discredit any questions, but just want to work through on this table real quick, and then I'll look back into the row. If you have questions, just keep them and we'll get to you, as the committee has the time. Thomas, did you have anything more on yours?
No, I think it's, if we go all the way to the top where it's broke down, I think that's gonna be where we can, where you see it. Cause like we have our subtotals here, where you have personnel, supplies, services, facilities, and debt, so those are the I believe. The 50-50 was the personnel and then,
Personnel, supplies and services.
Yeah, so, yeah, admin type of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And then-
Road equipment, things that are out there, wear and tear, they're actually on the road miles. Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, so,
and then the others.
yeah.
So that
Yeah,
was,
Okay.
so
Yeah,
instead of
it makes sense. I see what why you come up with that, because it does make sense. I mean, your admin side is, more or less the same, so,
Mhm.
okay.
I mean, what we're trying to get from the committee tonight is, maybe support for or recommendation for one, or at least explaining both options to the full select boards.
Hmm.
And so we were sharing these numbers now in this
Yeah.
context.
Okay.
Do you wanna take any I mean, that sums up the summary of the numbers. I think now would be a good time to ask the public for
Yeah.
some questions.
My question was, when the three towns pursued this interlocal agreement, did they pursue it in this avenue of the split 50-50, or did they do the road mileage, or was that determined after they had made the initial investment of trucks, plows, that kind of thing.
The
How do
Map-
we ease into this?
you referring to the Mapleton, Capitol Hill, Chapman,
Yeah,
three
because
towns?
that's what we're basing our interlocal agreement off from, is that correct?
Um,
Pretty much?
well, so, in part, we
In part.
brought them as an example that it can work. It has worked for them for decades now, a few decades. So they've got a way that it seems to work for them. So we brought them in to share,
Right,
how is it working? How does that feel? Every year they revisit the cost share model, because they take into account valuation, I think, for at least the admin part of it. For the roads, I think it stays pretty standard. Most towns aren't adding miles of road or deleting them even every year, so that stays a little more static for them. So the interlocal agreement, it used pieces of what they had, but Kevin had kind of pulled that together from a couple different models, and examples that worked.
because in my research, they're very rural. And they don't have a lot of industry, I mean, Damascus or Newcastle doesn't either, but we do have a vibrant main street, we have
Right, yeah.
a hospital,
yeah.
we have that kind of thing, whereas that particular area in Mapleton and Castleton, they don't have that, they don't even have a high school, they send
Yeah,
kids away.
yeah, like Mandy stated, we brought them in as like an example, it's not a one-to-one or apples to
Right.
apples, it was an
I
example
mean,
of.
municipal rates are very similar,
Right.
and ours,
Yeah.
Newcastle and Damascus are quite,
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
vastly, different.
The mill rate is based on the assessed value divided by the budget, that's all that is.
Yep.
So even if the mill rates are different, it doesn't affect the quality or the need for the services. So Damascus has a police department, Newcastle does not. That would in fact, if we had a police department, that would likely drive up our mill rate as well.
Right, exactly, so as we pursue a, added, source of revenue, which comes from the tax base, it's not like a corporation where you can just keep on charging more and more. I mean, you can.
Yes, it is. Been very successful at it.
You can, but the tax base only has so much to be called upon to contribute.
But that's also based on the overall assessed value of a community. So the threshold at which it becomes unaffordable is usually determined by when you start to see a lot of foreclosures. That's your, as well as the will of the people. So if I present a budget, or the town presents a budget for the legislative body, and it gets voted down, clearly that budget needs to be fixed. I can't do anything about the assessed value other than make the division and determine the mill rate. Just based on what the budget comes in and what the assessor says the assessed value is, determines the mill rate. Nothing else.
Any other questions at this point through what we've shared?
You took excuse me just a second, you took those numbers off current costs right now. And your assumptions were based on what again?
Assumptions in which, in the
Well,
long.
you said you had some numbers up there, you were assuming. And I lost you there, what you was assuming.
So those,
Assuming can get you in a lot of trouble.
Absolutely.
if you click on input control, that's those sums of those categories come from this line item budget. So the assumptions are about a premium, we have all of these driver labor wages in premium, we have fewer of them in standard, and we have fewer of them in the phase one downtown. So this is really what drives those summary documents. So just a connection directly to this
Yeah,
document.
that's just your summary for.
This is where all the data that Andy spent hours going through, looking at municipal budgets from the region. And we standardize the object codes based on what the state has. They're just numbers reflecting these assumptions. So this is the point where if you're invested in really doing the deep dive, this is the area to really explore.
Yeah, and that's one of them. So we have on this tab kind of the operating, just day-to-day operating budget, and then there's a couple more tabs that
Feed into so then go back to input control, go down to equipment. So the numbers way down here, where you start to look at facility equipment and debt, those are fed by what's on the next tab, which is capital outlay equipment. So that number matches what's down here, and this is driven by, again, the premium, the standard, you can see in the top right there. And then the downtown phase one, you know, Andy made assumptions about how many pieces of equipment, how many pieces of equipment do we expect in our contracts now? So that's where you see estimated column or row J, estimated expense, current contract. This shows you what our contract says, the type of equipment we need to have, and he has estimated expenses of those. So if we were to try to mirror that, what pieces of equipment do we need for premium? And then, you know, what piece of equipment do we need for standard? So all of this is just a matter of multiplying the number of pieces of equipment times the estimated value and whether or not that one actually, the standard needs it. So this information scrolls all the way down to give you your sums for each of those concepts. So there's, and then this is where I talked about equipment being a divided by 5 for a new piece of equipment. So we borrow it on a 5-year plan. And on a used piece of equipment under the model for Thomas, there's a little toggle switch on the summary, gives you 3 years divided by the cost.
Are those all bonds?
Nope, they're just short-term loans.
Andy, so I think maybe to clarify Larry's question, I'm not gonna talk for him, but the numbers is a lot in there. Are those like today's numbers as opposed to maybe like a year out or something? Okay,
Yep.
I think that's what you might have been asking if they were like,
Since we're assuming, what's your margin of error?
yeah.
3%, 5%, depends on
Three,
what,
five,
what,
okay.
well, what CPI does is gonna
Right,
affect
yeah.
both the contract costs and as well as the municipal costs.
Yes, I think that was a question I was saying,
Yeah.
like, okay, the numbers are accurate, but accurate today, they could be, if we phased in 2 years from now or something, they're gonna be.
Yeah.
They're
I mean, we
gonna have
talked
to
about,
factor in.
we talked about trying to do that, and
Yeah.
having a toggle switch to say, is this get launched in 2 years, 5 years?
Right, what do
And
you
then it's
do?
factoring, you're just factoring in some assumption about
Mhm.
CPI increases.
Yeah, exactly, so.
And it's just that, you know, if comparing apples to apples, what are we doing today? How much does it cost? If we were to start tomorrow, what it would cost?
Yeah,
And what we've learned is it costs a little more to do it ourselves
right,
in year one.
initially, Yeah.
And some of the things we then talked about, so that's the capital outlay for equipment. There's another one there for facilities. And Andy and I also talked about, honestly, a joint public works department would do very well for a congressional discretionary spending request.
Mhm.
That's, you know, essentially the old term was earmarks,
Yeah.
congressional earmarks. So this would be a good example of what we'd request for an earmark to help offset the cost of land acquisition and building construction.
Mhm.
And Andy has done a really good job trying to think about what pieces of what we would need for a facility.
Right.
And we've had those conversations among the committee in the past too. Do you want to talk about the long-term forecast?
And
yeah.
This has
that
been,
would
he
be
went down a
helpful to
deep
see.
dive. I stopped
I know.
following him when he got here. I just gave up.
Yeah, he's good at deep dives, we go through all the
Yeah.
projections there, which is great.
you know, so trying to, I mean, beyond year 1, 2, I mean, the only reason that we're all looking at this is the question is, you know, is there a point in which if we could do it cheaper without sacrificing service, or if it is a lesser service, we know that going into it, are we willing to, taxpayers willing to accept that? Still a safe standard, but a different standard. So that's what, again, the 3 different models there of service. So I tried to build it out 40 years. There's a lot of assumptions in there, and yes, they can get us in trouble, but I'll state them so that we know that they exist. You know, the same goes for the current pricing we have. There's a lot of assumptions in what that is. What we do have is 20 years of history of contracted service. So we can use the historical 20 years of data and project that going forward.
Yeah.
You know, same thing with other operating budgets, components of it. And so did try to project it out 40 years. That's the printout you have here. I'll try and make this a little bit bigger. This graph here tries to show the different levels of service where the costs are projected to go over the next 40 years. That's a long way out, and then some of this openly admit it's hard to even fathom some of the cost of this that far out, and we'll ever reach that, but. 3% over every year is what it is, and it's easy, it just maths out, and historically, the 20-year average annual increase in the contracted. Services for us has gone up 8%.
Oh, okay.
Annually each year. for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so that's, again, part of the reason we're here. Now, there's not a lot of ability to control what that is if we're not getting a lot of, bids, and we continue to, and know for Damascotta, the service, expectations had kind of changed over time and kind of, increased in those contracts, and so that drives the price up a little bit. I can get right back to you. So this one here shows the forecasted cost for those three levels of service. The blue line there on the top is the current budget, which takes into account and assumes 8% increase on the contracted service, and a 5% increase on the in-house, mostly for Damascotta.
We're both,
Year over year, for
Yeah.
continuing at that same level of service. Those three scenarios below that mapped out at 40 years for the premium, standard, and phased approach. See, the standard level of service is the lowest cost one. They all continue to stay on that track. The phased approach, my assumption was that after 5 years, that's when you would step into that next layer of bump out for staff, and equipment. So that's reflected in there. It makes it a little bit hard to kind of see it with detail on this view here, but, what I also did was then try to understand and show where that break even and where that then, is there a point in which it breaks even, and is there a point in which there's a cumulative savings for the towns by doing this effort? So you can see there, they're kind of closely grouped together, ranging from years. I think in this model, it's like 12 to 20,
Yeah,
in which
yeah.
any one of those three models that we would be doing ourselves are projecting to have a cumulative savings to the towns, and then every year after that, we'd be seeing that.
Yeah, this may start veering away from the current,
Same thing, but if we were to get a grant to cover, did assume 100%, that's best case scenario. The other model you just saw would be us taking care of all of it, so kind of a worst case scenario. I do try to budget high on that. For all the equipment costs, I assumed a 2.5% increase on the equipment year over year. So if we want to fund it in advance of a purchase, I try to put the formula, project out 10 years ahead times 2.5%. And then through another, I think 0.5% on top of that, every year. So it was almost 2.5, like 2.55%, I guess, every year over year for that cost. So trying to hope that that was a level one. I mean, if we take just the last 5 years, I mean, we could probably put 6 or 8% in there, over the long term, but I think over a longer period of time, it will level out, and hopefully stay a little more stable. Lord willing. So this one here, if we get the outside funding, of course, you'd be starting out with a lot less facility debt, not anticipating the equipment being bought with the cost of construction and acquisition of land potentially, as Kevin said. So what this would end up doing would shift that cumulative savings. The towns would start seeing that about 4 years earlier from the previous version, by saving that. And I think we assumed a 15-year loan for that upfront cost for the facility. Either 3 or 5 years for the equipment, and then eventually being able to pay for it by saving in advance. So you can eliminate the interest payments and that extra cost to the taxpayers when the next pieces have to be replaced. It also helps create a more, if you can get to that point, helps just kind of keep a stable budget for folks, so we aren't seeing balloons unless, something, 10 years down the road, geez, it'd be great to have this piece of equipment. Say you turn your roads back to gravel in some places and you want to buy a grader, that's gonna be a significant expense. But if the towns got to the point where they felt that was worthwhile effort, that's not accounted for in here. We're assuming all of the paved roads stay paved, and the cost to do that's not included in here. That's still a cost that we'd still be bearing.
And that's also assuming as soon as something's paid off, it's replaced.
As soon
So
as
if you have a 5-year piece of new equipment, you're replacing that piece of equipment.
it depends.
It's a steady, that number for equipment is always assuming that equipment on a loan.
or that payment still.
Yeah, that payment is
Or
continuing
it's growing.
year after year.
Yeah, so my
It
model.
doesn't come out and.
The way these are showing, if we're gonna keep one of the larger trucks, say for 10 years.
Yeah.
I projected to pay for it in 5,
Mhm.
and then the next 5 years, you're getting ready to pay for the next one. So for that 10-year
Okay,
period,
yeah.
you're paying a little bit higher. But then when it comes time, after you bought that second one, those payments on the other end then drop, because you're dividing it by 10 instead of 5. So that it, those first 10 years will be your heaviest costs. And then it kind of, drops a little bit. And those out, and they tried to stagger the purchases between a mix of used to start, and so that we aren't buying them all at once. But depending on the piece of equipment, just.
Oh, hi Rufus.
Yeah, you made it.
Hi, I made it.
Sort of. As you can see here, depending on what the equipment was that we were looking to do, these first couple are pickup trucks, I'm assuming 8 years on trucks, pickup trucks. 10 years for your like F550s, 12 if you get into your 750s, or bigger. This one, excavator, backhoe, loaders, either 10 or 12 if you're gonna own them. All depends how you treat them and care for them, but they should be able to last you quite a while. You get down in some of the smaller equipment, 8 years, assuming 8 years for the sidewalk tractor, still 10 years for the little whacker Newson like we have. Should we entertain a couple, one of those, small sidewalk machines, used in Damascata, a 5-year use on that, could get more certainly, but.
Now
It's a
realistic.
right, 7 years, for a skid steer. Again, doesn't mean you can't stretch one further another year or two or not, but just trying to assume, that's what the assumptions are in this, so. Yeah, projected out, in bold here, folks go and look at this, there's a lot to consider and look at here, and folks should have access to be able to view all this, where they're bolded is the purchase year.
Yeah, I gotcha, okay.
Yeah, put that in there.
Andy, does your maintenance cost increase to reflect the aging machine?
No, it goes up, I think I have that at 5% a year, simply put. But no, it doesn't factor that.
It's worth considering that as that piece of equipment ages, it's going to require, whatever the maintenance cost. Once it's paid off, I would say your maintenance cost is going to increase.
Yeah, I mean, if we've got 10 pieces of equipment, let's say, and they're all staggered replacement years, and you're running 8 to 10 years on average for the bigger pieces, is it fair to say if you've got your equipment or maintenance budget to a certain point, as long as they're equally distributed replacement years, that it would maybe be leveled out?
I expect over time that would probably be the case.
I mean, certainly depending on what it is, I mean,
Yeah.
certain ones might cost you more,
So
but.
if you're mixing and you're rolling equipment through, you always have like the same amount of new
Right.
and used, so it may not, other than normal increases, it may change significantly, yeah.
I guess kind of the hope, if we wanna dive that deep, we're gonna have to, I would think, pay someone else and invest in some software to try and get that specific on the modeling. I did try to go through on the input tab there, I think it was that one, I did forecast it out. When I go down through like these operating expenses, I don't assume they're all 5% over time. I mean, software costs are, the increases on those over time is more like 2, maybe 3%. Where personnel costs might be changing, we probably are all aware what health insurance premiums did this past year, and so.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's not the new norm, that'll level out and you get these bumps, but I mean, that might be a higher annual average increase than. Again, your software costs versus your personnel, wages. So I do account for some of those differences. Some are 5%, some are 2.5%. So
Right, software is such a small percentage of that.
Absolutely, but there's about 100 lines in there, and I did that same calculation, tried to apply that same method to all those lines. It absolutely is a small one.
Like I said, he took a deep dive that I was not willing to follow.
Is the maintenance going to be done by our public works department, or is that going to be contracted to somebody else?
If we can hold that one, I'll come back and answer that. John had his hand up earlier.
Okay.
One of the things that you're looking at, replacing smaller trucks, for instance. The police department, $75,000 for a pickup truck,
Fully up.
and they get three years out of the sewer district. we get 3 years out of a truck that we use to plow.
Mhm.
We're lucky.
Mhm.
And those trucks, 3/4 ton or 1 ton truck. I don't know if you put enough money in that budget. When you say you're gonna get 7 years out of a pickup truck. That's used by multiple people for multiple purposes.
And if I could just clarify a couple of points you made. The police department, $75,000 truck is a fully outfitted, lights, equipment, everything on that to go out on the road and do its job. We've been budgeting and planning for 4 years, because there's between 15,000 and 20,000 miles a year. After 4 years, it then will get shifted to be the third vehicle, and so still in use for another 2 years is our plan, so it's 6 years really that it's available to us. In my experience, overseeing public works in another town, we've always gotten more than 3 years out of a 1 ton truck or bigger. When you're buying them new and taking care of them, you absolutely can get longer.
Okay, I'm not joking here. I mean, that road was done, what, 3 years ago? Oh, my word.
You can,
It'll destroy your equipment.
Well, I think that's maybe a different budget conversation. As standard, we would aim for our roads to be in a certain condition, because you're right, that would absolutely destroy the life cycle. And I'm not accounting for roads to be, if you score them on 1 out of 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, need to be reconstructed 5 years ago. I'm not accounting for them to be in bad condition. So that is a reality that we have to accept and understand, like, how does that play? Yeah, your question about maintenance, it depends. Under the premium level of service, it's built out and assumed that we would have a mechanic on staff. Now that might not be someone who's gonna swap out a diesel engine for us, but that should be someone who can take care of a lot of our regular maintenance needs on the equipment. There's still gonna be some things that we have to contract out for special service, special needs, certainly, and that's reflected in there as well. Under the standard level of service, you might have some mechanically inclined folks on the crew that can help with oil changes and a few other things, but just assuming you'd have a higher cost to contract out and go to the garage, a garage somewhere to do that work.
And the crew is how many?
Depends on which level of service we're aiming to
Standard.
provide. The standard,
So 10 for the premium. And 8 for the standard. I mean, you're talking temporary too.
yeah, I got seven.
Seven-
1, 2,
seven
3,
and
4, 5, 6,
9.
7 full-time and a couple temporary folks in the winter to help out, most likely. And on the premium level, I think it was 11 full-time equivalent.
10. Or
10 full-time equivalent, and then some additional seasonal help. The other, yeah.
Andy, you laid this out like it's gonna cost you less money every year down the road. Looking back over the last 25 to 30 years here in Damascotta, I don't know of a department that is smaller today than it was 20 years ago. So I have a hard time understanding how you think this department is gonna cost us less money as we get 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Because as equipment, for one thing, as equipment gets older, it really, the maintenance on it doubles very quickly from new to 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road. So that's a big factor. Employees are gonna cost you more second, third, fourth year down the road. Just in insurance, if you don't give them doing wages, just insurance is gonna cost you more. So I don't really understand where you think you're gonna save a lot of money 5, 6, 7 years into this.
You gotta compare it to the current contract level.
I'm looking at it.
So if you look at an
But
8%.
you're not factoring in there losing an engine.
If I can call the order,
You're not factoring in there any major,
Larry, I can answer the question, I've attempted to build out those costs with increases annually for a 40-year period. And so I am trying to account for that. I think I assume wages would go up 5% a year. Maybe that's high, but I'd rather estimate a little bit high and have a worst case scenario. And if it comes in lower rate, health insurance, again, I would encourage folks that want to dive a little bit deeper, because we're not gonna have the time tonight to be able to go through every line and every assumption in here, but truly want folks to, this is available to folks to take a look at. But I have gone through and tried to forecast 40 years of expenses with increased costs. I am not assuming that there'd be a big jump in staff, because I think whether it's the premium level of service or the standard level of service, if we maintain those levels of service to be met, unless you add more roads and add more sidewalks,
Yeah, or
at what point then, so I didn't assume for that roads, I don't imagine we're adding a lot of new roads. Sidewalks, yeah, the towns are, endeavoring to try and add some more sidewalks, so that should be taken into account. Though they are ambitions at this point and not set in stone to happen. So there is that one caveat, but I do think that you'd still be able to, unless we're trying to add 5 miles of sidewalk. At what point do you need to add another piece of equipment, another person? So I don't know that we see it would have to grow to the point where some of these other departments may have grown over time because we started at a certain point and the town has expressed a desire to, or the state's required us to hit more service. And so it comes a point where you gotta look at, can your staff that you have do that level of work, or do you need to add another layer, another person or two? So I'm not as projecting that we would be adding under the
I
premium
know you're
level
not projecting
anymore,
that,
but I am projecting the annual increases.
I'm just looking at history of the town over the last 25 years or 30 years. We don't have a department today that's smaller than it was 25 years ago.
Right, and the needs.
And I don't see that how this is gonna be any different, because you're gonna have more supervision, more people, because that's just the way it goes, which is not gonna drive a price down, it's gonna drive a price up.
So I feel like it's maybe to some degree on equal footing when you look at the contracted cost. Because if our needs for service levels go up and we need to add people, then our contracts services are gonna have to be expanded, and presumably those costs are also gonna go up. So in some regard, that might be on some equal footing, and if we have to go up that, those should too. Currently Newcastle has to contract everything out. We have 2 people. So if you look at Damascotta's history over the last 10 years in public works, we went from 1 person to 2. So that makes it look pretty significant in that period of time on that particular line. But I think, if you're looking at these service levels as a projected 40 years in that contracted, all contractor where we are now, keep continuing that same level. I'm assuming those will both end up going up if you're expanding service.
Well, I mean, there's so many variables to it. You lose something in the middle of the night, truck off the road in the ditch. Where right now you call your contract calls the record, and it's not on the town's network, it's on his network.
the bigger picture there
Big
is,
picture
is the, what are we comparing it to?
Well,
That's what
the
it
risk,
looks like, it's not, I
I'm
agree.
comparing it to the risk there. I'm not trying to argue with them, just
Sure,
trying
sure,
to
no, but I,
point out the risk.
to answer your
The
question
risks
about,
are, when we do it ourselves.
I'll stop talking.
Yeah, I mean, Larry, if we
When we
can,
start doing it ourselves.
You want me to answer the question?
I was talking, you just butted in, if you don't mind, excuse me very much.
this is a committee meeting, first of all, and
Well, you,
my job as the chair, I need to.
raised my hand, you answered it.
You have, and then the person on the committee is trying to answer your question. You've had a lot of things put in there and piled on. He's trying to get an answer out to you. Our job here tonight is to work amongst the
Well, they do the
committee.
job.
We appreciate everyone being here and the questions you're bringing, but we do need a chance to work within here.
The cost is compared to what we know for projections over contracted services.
I understand.
Nobody said it, let me finish. Nobody said it's going to be cheaper. Everything goes up. Not gonna be saving money. It's not gonna be diving down. It's gonna be, so we can see with these graphs, we have a projection of the last 20, 30 years, so it was a projected
20.
contracts of at least 8%. So yes, it's going to grow, but we're growing, the contracts are growing exponentially. So it's like, where do you want to save money? You've got to compare, not comparing against nothing, not comparing against making a smaller department. You're comparing it to what we have now, the contracted services. So
Take one more and then we'll move on to the next budget or line item in the agenda.
When it talks about your comparative numbers with the contractor, and you can, help me out with this. When the contractor says we've got a storm and they send crews out on the road, the town is responsible for that contract price. When we assume the responsibility of plowing those roads, are we paying the plowers and the maintenance people by the hour? And are they gonna get holiday pay, premium pay?
they'd be employed, that's in the
That's
projections, right?
important
Yeah,
to-
I'm not answering for you, but yes.
Yep, yeah, I've accounted for all of that, whether it ends up being that way or not. I mean, some of this
And I mean-
is making the assumption there might be a collective bargaining agreement that might demand those types of things, because other departments are paying those, as, Larry brought that up at one of
Yeah,
the meetings
like
too.
he said, I mean, when you're talking about a contract, you're removing yourself from that administrative nightmare.
Well,
No, it's built into the
it's
contract.
built in. They're
Well,
assuming the risk, but they pay.
They're assuming the risk, but it's,
And,
but the
You know,
contractors build that in, so you pay for that.
exactly, but you as the town administrator is not dealing with it as much as the contractor.
Right.
No, but the hierarchy here is the road commissioner would be dealing with those.
2 AM and say my road isn't plowed.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes,
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
I encourage them not to call it contractor, we're the employer of the contractor, right? And so I would encourage folks always to call town.
Yeah.
We're the ones hiring the work, so we should be the one driving the demand and questions and level of service expectations to the contractor. If they're taking upon themselves to answer and drive a level of service that every individual wants in our communities, it's happened before. We all of a sudden, the select board who's hired a contractor doesn't know a service level's changed, and so we do try to direct all of that through us.
Gerald just talked about, the cost savings will be costing us less, right? You understand?
No,
That's-
the cost doesn't grow as much as it
Compared
does.
to the current projection, what Andy, I'm just seeing this for the first time.
You scroll down a little
With these
bit.
Projections,
It's like,
so
the reason for doing this is
to control costs long-term.
To understand
40
the,
years.
the long
only
time
person in this room that's gonna see a cost saving is that gentleman right there.
My kids,
Isn't that what we're here to do, is for the future generations?
the cost savings really are, and I'll just talk about the standard one first. The cost savings really start to happen if we get a CDS grant to build our facility. It's 8 years out, then we start to see some real cost savings.
Right.
If we have to build it ourselves, it's 12 years out. So that's when we start to see where the difference between the cost of an annualized contract cost versus the annual increases from a municipal budget start to break away from each other. That's when the towns start to really see savings. It's not money back in your pocket, but it's not a cost, it's added additional assets, right?
Yeah, it's
So-
long-term.
But this graph that I'm just trying to increase this graph that I'll increase here isn't showing that's gonna cost, our costs to run the department aren't gonna go down per se. This is showing the difference in the potential increase and decrease from the current contract. So if we stayed on the current model we have now, it's projecting, it's a long time out, so I have a hard time wrapping my head around it, but again, 8% every year, year over year, is
Compounding.
simple math. And so it ends up being, God forbid, potentially close to a $30 million effort 40 years from now. To continue under the same circumstances we're in right now.
That's that number, you can barely see it. Can you scroll down a little, just a little bit?
Downer.
Up, yeah, there you go. You can
Uh,
see that the blue line at the end of this. That shows you a $30 million cost to the town.
Right, and so to Kevin's point, you're not getting the money back, but you're not paying nearly as much as this is assumed and projected. Welcome anyone to get through and look through there and find where maybe something's not adding up right or whatever. This is a lot of years, a lot of cells to put in there, but. Went through it a few different times to try and look at this, and if we run out any of those three service levels and doing it in-house. It appears, say 40 years from now, but even 15 to 20 years from now, there's a point where cumulatively the towns will save money. And then year after year, you're talking about potentially $1 million less that you'd be paying if you continued on the current trend that we've had for the last 20 years.
This is just one piece of the budget, whereas you have other town operations, the school and the
Right.
transfer facility, so that all compounds on to the taxpayer.
Absolutely, and in a simple graph here with everything behind it that needs to be verified still, for folk to look at. The gap there and what it could potentially save the two communities over a 40-year period cumulatively. You're talking over $100 million potentially under any one of those three scenarios.
Rachel had a question, Mr. Chair.
I get really tired of hearing those kind of pie in the sky numbers, because I have to say, over decades. Anytime there's talk of spending more to save money, it doesn't. I mean, you're talking about potential grants and outsource funding, that kind of thing. For years, that when we changed forms of government, that was part of the reason. Oh, well, if we get people who are professionals, they'll come in with all kinds of grants, that'll pay their wages. Well, no, it doesn't, and there's just this endless escalation in costs for right.
Just
For people
to
who are
answer
trying-
that, in Newcastle, I know Kevin has more than paid his salary in grants that he's secured for us. So it is a reality.
Saying over time, the taxes have just continued to climb and climb and climb, and we keep hearing about savings here and there and someplace else.
So I'll last thing on where we're talking about the budget stuff now, this committee has been tasked by the select boards, the select board members. But of the larger boards to identify, are there ways in which taxpayers would pay less in the future, to run public works in-house, and at the moment, these are where we've arrived, and where we're at, and so we encourage folks to take a look at the budget docs that are available, to review. At this point, do feel we need to move, we've been here for now, we do need to move, we have a couple of other things on this agenda we need to get through the committee to be able to talk about, next steps, so. The next item, to review and go forward with, is the draft interlocal agreement.
We've been through this a few times now. I have,
Mhm.
I have now shared this with the town's attorney and asked him to provide some feedback. There are still comments in here, but what I'd like to do is get a general sense that what's here and talk a little bit about the cost share formula that we've alluded to in the budget. But if you want to just scroll down some of this, I have some questions still outstanding in this, and the attorney's gonna look it over too. That's been, I just left that open to
Mhm.
re-explain it, but that's the approach we're looking to take, is the 3 appointed members for the oversight board. They are responsible for the policy of the department and helping develop the work plan. And then it'd be the managing town that would oversee employees. So you can scroll down. I don't wanna keep repeating myself, but yeah, performance standards, I think I put standards of ditches. So there's still some questions in here that need to be hashed out. And attorney review. But what I'd like to do is ask this committee to talk about the cost share. Can you hit exhibit A?
Have we had legal look at this too? Not yet. Okay.
There's just on retainer.
Oh, I can, yeah, it's less expensive for me to just give it. to you.
Yes,
Okay.
that's,
Um. We talked about using the average before, average maintenance between the winter miles and summer miles. Summer miles again are the town-owned roads versus winter maintenance, which is state aid roads that we plow but don't have to maintain. And the average of those two give us those percentages of 35, 36 and 64. That was all well and good until we started looking at the actual cost for Newcastle to do this. So the question to this committee is, they'd be open to the idea of facilities and equipment costs being tied to this part of the formula, and having the other part of it more of an even split. Looking at you, Daryl.
well, I think it's the only way that you would be able to do it. I mean, I'm gonna say I like the other way, obviously. But it'll be dead in the water. I mean, I can't imagine you folks in Newcastle would say, yes, well, that sounds great, and, Denver's got us coming out of it, so I think it's probably the only one that it makes sense, because of the road miles and the actual physical stuff is separate, but the admin is kind of the same, right? You have the same people doing the same paperwork, whatever, kind of the same thing behind the scenes, so, yeah. Do I like the numbers? No, but the formula is sound. Oh,
Just, to clarify, when you mention admin, Thomas, when you put yours in there, are you assuming just like the road commissioner and the foreman, or are you assuming all personnel costs would potentially be 50-50?
Admin personnel, the
Personnel,
services,
yeah.
so when you look at those summaries, it's the facilities and the equipment that would be adhere to this formula. And all those other components would adhere to the 50-50 split.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I could see thinking of Danvers got a, some folks might ask questions about that idea and, I just don't see where the personnel would be a likely 50-50 split when you got, 2/3 of the miles of the two towns. But I'm wondering, like, facility on the other hand, like, everyone's in the same facility, and like, to me, that would make a little bit of sense to
I was thinking
consider.
it's more admin, but not, okay.
But if
When
you're
we come
talking,
up with a work plan, if this was all ratified and was a thing, would we be developing a work plan so that 65% of the work would be done? Or would it be trying to come up with a work plan where you spend half the time in both towns? I would kind of imagine it would be trying to split up evenly.
Potentially, when Paul had talked to us earlier on, we had talked about the possibility of letting the conditions and the needs drive the work plan, right? And so there might be months at a time where, you know, it's not 50-50 in one town or the other, but there's, depending on the needs and if your goal, right, this is where we get into the performance standards and expectations. If your goal is to maintain X miles of ditch every year and never let them fill up culverts, so you have to prematurely replace them, and they don't cause water, ice dams in the wintertime, like, I think it's more about, you know, what Paul was talking about, more about what are we expecting to accomplish? And it might mean that it won't always be 50-50. It can't be. You got more roads in one town than the other. Doesn't mean you're not gonna spend more time in Damascotta for too much. If that's where the road work, you know, if you're clearing all the trees on Lesnar Road, that's gonna take a minute. I think, you know, he was more trying to get away from, you know, counting it in a way that there needs to be a checkpoint to make sure it's still division is equal to whatever the cost share is, but you let it be driven by the need rather than the expectation that it must be 50-50, because inevitably you're gonna fall behind in, you know, Newcastle realistically, because you've got more than 50% of the road miles.
Right, but even when you look at the standard today and how far Newcastle is in terms of its maintenance of its roads versus where we need to get with Damascotta. That's a shift that might take 10 years to get at equal.
Or 3, or 10, or 20, who knows,
I
right?
don't know.
It's a commitment to a work
Right.
plan. Certainly, and it's certainly a level of detail that we haven't
Even
put
delved
in there
into
to
yet.
figure out.
Well, because the question is, do we wanna do this
Mhm.
first? And that has to go to the select boards. Based on, one, an assumption of budget, and then two. With that assumption of budget, how do we apply it through an interlocal agreement? So what needs to come of that is do the boards wanna move forward with an interlocal agreement to give to the legislative bodies? For them to consider.
Mhm.
So this needs to be formalized
This needs
to
yeah.
a greater extent. Before it would be taken to the legislative body, and if we wanna do it for annual town meeting, we need to do it in the next month. Got about a month before
Warrants are set.
warrants are set. And the other piece, so that begs the question, like, how do we get to a place where we're comfortable with a cost share that we can adhere to, or does the interlocal agreement point to a cost share that are made up by the select boards? So the interlocal agreement doesn't hold that number immediate to the interlocal agreement, it's held, the legislative body decides that the interlocal agreement in terms of how we're structured is there, but the cost share is the decision of the select boards.
That's policy
Which is fine.
or
Yeah.
refers to a cost share policy.
That is reviewed every 3 years or 5 years. Or not. Set once and done. I don't know, those are some of the things I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't run too much out, I don't think, I mean, we did at one point, try a couple different scenarios, but, you know, to the point about, you know, the valuation base, I mean, is that something that the committee would wanna try and factor into any kind of formula? Acknowledging there's a bit of valuation, a bit of a difference there. When it comes to population, it's probably not a whole lot of, you're not performing the service based on that. You know, you're really basing your work based more on the road miles.
I think that, the road mile focus is gonna be, I mean, it's really simple and pretty straightforward, it just is splitting out, so when I think I assumed. I think you said breakdown on it, but with Tom's split, admin in my head was the office
Yeah.
stuff, I wasn't, it was breaking out into the.
Here's another
so,
question I have then.
Yeah,
Maybe, what if we look at the summer maintenance, the 60-40 split instead of a 35? I mean, even just that could make or break this. So the average of the two. So what you're talking about is, we have enough crew to plow all the roads.
Mm.
That's 3 or 4 months of the year. The rest of the time is the question of how much are we gonna be able to get done with a crew that we've hired to take care of just plowing. We're able to use that crew for all the other things we need, and it really is more of a 60-40 split. Right, rather than the 35-64. So could you jump back to the Excel spreadsheet for a second? And just change it, to say 60-40 on the first one. Or to the summary.
yeah, 'cause that's where you get into the weeds where, the
I mean, what's-
plowing is just road miles, it's just
Yeah,
plowing, and that's it.
roll down to,
What your projects and
Possible, yeah.
your maintenance.
change that to 40 and 60. Can you scroll down and see what it does to the,
Does the public works do the sanitaries and the playgrounds and things like that?
not currently, no.
So that's an additional expense.
Currently, it's a separate contract, but
Cemeteries up,
if the
yeah.
crews are available and that contract is up. That could be done by our crews. I'm hoping to find some time, especially in the winter when we're not plowing, is to help us with the facilities. Cause right now I'm the facilities
You're
guy.
the facilities captain.
Yeah. Can you change that other one to 60-42? Right there, yeah. So you scroll, I wouldn't even, I would just look at the top numbers, so. That gets easier, right? The closer we get to 50-50, that gets easier to swallow. So now instead of a -45, which we had before, for Damerscott and 400,000, it starts to get a little easier. But
Yeah.
it's still not. Something, I mean, that's a question for Thomas and Rufus, really, like how much
Where do you guys?
more will
Yeah.
the community accept
Yeah,
if we wanted to do this at all? Okay, you can undo those. Control Z. There you go. Another toggle switch I could make. So really, this is where I think the heart of it comes down to is, what is this cost share formula that seems fair and equitable for both communities? And I don't know if we have to decide it as a group. We can inform the boards and then have a full debate there about what to present forward for the public,
yeah.
but. What I'd like to ask then is. If we can't solve this right now, that we schedule a time with the select boards, maybe a joint select board meeting.
Yeah, I think we're at a point now where.
And we do a more formal
really-
presentation.
Really got some meat here that can be presented to both boards. And then go from there, yeah, I think the last time we talked about it was more, it still had to be a lot of stuff hashed out on the projections, but I think you guys are definitely at a point now where, as far as I see it for the Damerscott, we can bring it to the board, and if they have any questions and concerns, right, hash that out, but.
And the other element to the, okay, so that's the agreement. What's next on our agenda? Post timeline,
Mhm.
right, so. If we wanted to do this, well, we need to have a joint meeting. Public meeting, would that be the select board meeting or select board's meeting? To present that to them, would that be the,
So you could do it, yeah, do in April, yeah.
I mean, the select board would finalize we have that accounted for, right? Public meeting week of 4/20. That's after we did that, so yeah, I guess we have to swap that for
that's
select.
Why don't you, yeah, make that committee meeting into a, yeah. Joint meeting, whatever date you.
joint select board meeting?
Yeah,
Yeah, one of the, on timeline, one of the minor things, the difference this year, Newcastle has, all your warrant articles are on a ballot, a referendum. We still have some components on the floor, and
Mhm.
so in terms of like finalizing a warrant, we'd have the ability to add a special town meeting same night, so everyone's there.
right,
At the
yeah,
end of, and on the referendum, you're not already planning to meet people come throughout the day, whenever the polls are open, so it'd have to be a separate special town meeting in that regard, which, may certainly have an impact on how many people turn out.
Mhm.
I'm also more inclined to say that it's possible for us to have something on the warrant. To ask the question, does the community support an interlocal agreement?
We have it on here to continue to have public meetings and such leading up to.
Oh, yes,
The June vote.
you would still have public hearings on, on the warrant articles. Or on that warrant article, but, well, trying to help educate the community on what this is and why we'd even consider it. The other question we'd also wanna ask is, all right, so let's say we were to get the approval of an interlocal agreement. We would still need to start thinking about where the heck we would put a building or, figuring out the cost of a building. And remember, the interlocal agreement has thresholds at which it gets harder and harder to extract ourselves from it. Just having an interlocal agreement and not spending any money. We can get out of it if we decide that the cost is too high.
Right, we haven't invested in it, yeah.
Or if we
Yeah.
have
What was the-
something about, allowed to get under the select boards to be under contract for a parcel to do due diligence. And we spend a little bit of money on that due diligence of the site. And get an engineering cost to figure out how much a building might be before coming back to the public next
Mhm.
year. Is what I was also thinking about, so it's two questions to the public. Do we wanna have an interlocal agreement? Can we go explore options for a parcel?
Draw pre-facility, okay, yeah.
Yeah, just making sure they had a chance to finish their thoughts here first, and then
Yeah.
get you after.
I'm good, go ahead, yeah.
Margaret?
Just a thought or an observation. One thing that troubles me is, in terms of division of services. You know, let's face it, Damascotta is the hub for everything. Pembroke, Bristol, South Bristol, people, you provide the services for this entire region. And, you know, how, it's gotta be a difficult task. I'm not proposing a solution. To decide, you know, Damascotta pays this, Newcastle pays that, when you still have the responsibility of being the primary hub for business. And people coming in to use your roads, your services, your businesses, your everything, and they're coming in from, what, 10, 11 different towns? That would be a struggle for me. I mean, it would seem to me, it would be a struggle for you as you try to make those decisions.
The cost share decision?
Yeah, because you're really, I mean, you're the economic hub. For the
Right.
region, let's face it, I mean.
Service
We
center.
we say we have a downtown. I love my town, but we don't really have much of a city center in Newcastle. You know, we come to Damascotta. And, so anyway, we're more rural in Newcastle, but so is Bristol, more rural, so is South Bristol, more rural, so is, you know, all the other towns that come to your town.
Hmm.
To do this.
Yeah, I mean, from a road maintenance perspective, I mean, generally speaking, you're still, when it comes to constructing roads, I can see where maybe the standard needs to be a little bit higher on some of your heavier travel roads. Those tend to be your state aid roads, though, so the state's gonna generally contribute to that.
And just a
from-
thought, I don't
yeah.
have a solution, it's just that I
I'm just
think
wondering-
we have to acknowledge how important Damascotta is to the entire region.
Thomas, Rufus, Daryl, in terms of kind of this timeline that's being proposed, thoughts, feelings, right pace, too quick, need more something.
I'm good with getting it in front of the boards for the next scheduled meeting, so there, you know, I mean, I'm assuming Newcastle, you guys are gonna have some questions, they're gonna have some questions here, so. I think you're at a good point with the numbers and what's proposed, so. There's enough.
A joint meeting might mean we're back in here again, figuring out more things.
Oh, yeah, something might come out of that are gonna, you know, you're
So,
either town, so. So the sooner we probably do that at this point, we're in a good spot where. You wanna get us into,
I think we've taken the
Or April
direction
or
that
whatever.
the boards have, since we last talked with our boards.
Since we give an update back in
Yeah.
the fall, and they said, at least finish your work.
yeah,
So I think we're close enough to say, we'll work on the actual presentation to give to the boards.
yes, agreed. I
Based on
think
this
you've
information.
got enough here that it's,
Okay.
you know, that there's enough there to present. And answer most questions, you know, for the most part, in particular, so, okay.
Cindy and I will try to find a date that works for both boards. Prefer to do it sooner rather than later.
Mhm.
I don't know what the 25th looks like for you guys of March. The Wednesday.
Regular, it's not the weeks, our regular ones, we would like to be done, you're pretty much done with the budget stuff now, you probably finish it out next week.
Yeah, we should be, yeah,
25th.
should be outside of that, so.
I think it was tentatively scheduled, but at this pace they're on right now with budget review, I don't think they'll need to meet otherwise for that purpose. So,
So I'm gonna propose that. That gives me time to get feedback from the select boards about. Whether or not they wanna move forward and drafting some warrant articles related to it, if so.
yeah, anything printed on a warrant for annual town meeting that goes to be printed for electronic count needs to be submitted by the 15th or 16th of April.
Yep.
At the latest.
April 15th, that's the deadline.
So. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Anything else from the meeting? Folks have any other questions that have come out tonight? At this point?
I got one more, Andy, I
Yeah.
promise I'll be nice. How much time have you guys spent with the surrounding town managers and public works executives? Talking to them about what their public works departments cost and how long they built them, how long it took them to build them?
I haven't asked them how long it took them to build them. I mean, I could pull budgets from all of them and talk to the managers in those towns. But I haven't,
Goes in conjunction, what towns have you spoken with?
Waldeboro, Wiscasset, Booth Bay. My experience working in Vinyl Haven with the public works department out there with 45 miles of road to maintain.
My experience in Bar Harbor and
a couple
Saco.
other towns as well. So we just, those three towns primarily, because they're right immediate to us and we're based on road miles. They give us a pretty similar, with Waldeboro's, I think that's 70 or 72 miles. So I mean, that's pretty darn close to the combined winter miles we have. You know, so I thought those were pretty comparable towns when it came to the budget, and the levels of service that they aim to provide might not be quite with the premium of what we see in our two towns right now. But again, that's the whole point of looking at those different curves and different cost models, is what level of service do we wanna have, and you know, do we wanna change it? And the cost of everything is always about the service level, how quick we can respond to things, how well we do things, how quick we turn around and do them next time. You know, all that requires the input from folks to understand, and when, you know, this time of year is a lot of concern and questions and complaints about the state of the roads and sidewalks, at least in Damascus. So I mean, we've got a lot of work we can do right now. You know, but the budget doesn't support doing probably a third of,
Yeah.
or a quarter of what we need at the moment, so we'll do the best we can, but it always comes back to trying to correlate that to service levels and expectations of the towns, and at least from a functioning standpoint on standard level of service, that's what I kind of figure all of those were kind of at. But like on our premium level, you know, for certain things, if they had, for Waldeboro, I think I had used the fuel for that, and one of the questions came up, well, if they're hitting a standard level of service, I think I multiplied that by 1.2 or something like that, assuming that we'd be out on the roads more frequently, longer than they might be doing, so we're doubling back on things in the same time they might do it once.
Did you find out from Waldeboro what their rotation of equipment is?
I didn't. No, I did talk to Julie and she said, you know, don't forget to make sure you count for the replacement, and I feel like, you know, kind of factor
So
that
you talked to
in.
Julie, you didn't talk to her, I can't remember the new guys.
My counterpart, yeah, Julie Kaiser, the.
I know Julie. Trying to think of the road guys,
Yeah.
can't think of it.
So we're still talking about a 25-year legally binding agreement,
That's what's proposed in the draft agreement now, yeah.
25 years.
And you can get out of it if you feel that the feasibility of the land and the building is not
Yeah.
come to fruition, right?
Yeah, and the way,
Yeah, right
the
now.
way it's written, until debt's been incurred, it's a much easier, and I'll put it back up, it's a much easier withdrawal process at that point, the pre-facility, but pre-debt. It's a lot different, you know, once the debt's been incurred, for both towns' sake, it's hard, you can't leave one town with paying the balance of that, and so. It's the idea of getting to the next step, where we're asking for voter consideration and approval for moving the next step forward, would allow then. Smaller costs to be incurred to be able to, okay, can't really spend money exploring a site for a facility. Unless you can pay for an interest in that property typically, maybe there's someone out there that's saying, oh, I'll just let you do it. I won't charge you, but typically if you're gonna say, someone's selling property and you wanna tie up their interest and take it off the market for 6 months, 12 months, you have to pay that.
Some earnest
purchase-
money.
Purchase option, right? And
Yep.
it secures our time then. At this moment, we're not asking for that. We're just saying this would give us then the boards the ability to kind of take that next step. You'd still appropriate it through either your facility reserve accounts if you have them, if the select boards wanted to, or come back to the voters again and ask for
Do you
some
have
money to
some
do that.
sites that you're contemplating in the back of your head?
Always looking for things. I don't think at
But I
this
mean,
point
that's
there's
nothing
anything that's.
firm. You don't have a real hard place,
Mm-mm.
one way or the other,
No.
one town or the other.
Keep that pitch in mind, because that's what you're gonna need to pitch. I mean, other than a marriage commitment and a 30-year house mortgage, I've never signed up for 25 years for anything, but I did 23 years in the military. And never signed up for 4 years in the.
Yep. It is, it's.
I'm not being, glib here, it's,
It's a long commitment.
once you're in, folks, you're all in.
Yeah, I think that was the intent to try and write this pre-facility early withdrawal clause in here, acknowledging that it's a different level until you incur that debt. So it allows the towns to understand like there's a shared opportunity and agreement here to work forward, and once that town have to approve the debt, we're not asking for anyone to approve bonding of any amount at this point. So there'll still be that check.
I mean, I'm thinking Congress or whatever, you know, I mean, it's like, do we know what the feel of each town is? Do they want this? Do we want this?
I think they would know that.
No. This is it, folks.
Well, no, it's not. I mean, the intent here is this working group was just supposed to propose something to the select boards. The select boards make the decision about putting it on the
It
warrant.
goes in a warrant.
If it's on the warrant, then it becomes more of a community outreach, public outreach, explaining what this is and encouraging people to ask questions, delve into the details. And so basically we'd have from April 15th until June 9th in Newcastle and June.
That's not even due process 60 days.
Yes, it is.
May to June, that's
Yeah.
30.
Well, you got the second half, it's second half of April to the middle of June.
Okay, so
We got it on
Yeah,
here, that there'd
maybe,
be a,
yeah, I mean, but you're asking us to assume a very long-term commitment with a very short-term dive in and delve, you know?
I have
So
a
that
question.
becomes-
Just to
that
follow up
becomes-
on this real quick.
yeah, go ahead.
If you don't mind, like, is there a timeline alternative that you're thinking would make you feel more comfortable, and
Well,
what more do you
I'm
wanna
saying
learn?
If we had the timeline that I feel that is more palatable would be that you've answered all the questions and you have the community's opportunity to digest and really think about it and not work backwards from, okay, you gotta meet June. Well, maybe we don't meet June. Cause you're talking about a long-term commitment, maybe, you know, special meetings or warrants or things like that for this particular type of endeavor would be much more suited than try to ease it into the commitments of the town timeline versus what we need to know in a proper timeline. So, you know, if you give everybody enough, you know, even though there are people that may not be interested, we tried this before to get the communities interested in budgets, education, you know, school budgets. You know, but you've at least made the attempt. So you can, if we don't meet this June commitment, maybe we should push it out.
Yeah,
I
so
don't know.
it sounds like the next meeting we're proposing would be of a joint select board, in which we would encourage folks to bring that, if they're still concerned about, we don't feel we have enough yet, I would recommend sharing it at that meeting as well.
Well, I'm thinking about the general public.
Yep.
I mean,
And your, not, but your select boards may, you know, I have no idea what
what they
my
want.
fellow select board members over Newcastle do. There may be, I mean, that's another section to go through. There
Sure.
may be questions raised there, from.
They may
from
tell
other
us,
members.
slow
They-
down.
They may, yeah, you know.
Or no, might be a flat out no, but until the select boards have a chance to see what we've developed. And we've at least suggested a timeline as a committee. This is a timeline we're suggesting. Your comments are valid and should be shared with the select board.
Just gonna come back over here, you had a hand up for a while.
When you talk about meeting with the select board, so far, it hasn't felt like the presentations and the information is objective. That doesn't feel that way to me anyway. And something like when you mentioned you checked with 3 towns, but when Larry asked about, you know, the actual costs, the real costs involved, and you spoke with Julie, I don't know who this Julie person is. I'm guessing she's not the one who's actually doing, you know, the work on the trucks and has some, you know, some idea of what kind of overtime is invested, that sort of thing. It just feels like there's a lot of real financial information missing. I mean, it's a pretty picture, but
Well, I guess I would encourage folks to dive into that and share where it is missing. I mean, I'm trying the best we can to forecast out, and we've got a lot of line items, like if we're gonna present a budget otherwise, I mean, I think there's 60 or 70 line items in there, so it really is pretty comprehensive in terms of being able to set up a department, again, looking at other departments, having run them ourselves in other towns, like I feel like we're doing the best we can, so if we're missing something, we truly need other folks to dive in and identify that, but I don't know that we are missing a lot on the line item side.
Andy, those.
We also have our consultant who's reviewed these numbers himself, was comfortable with them. I sent this out to my public works director from Saco, who's now a town manager in Cape Elizabeth. He says he'll take a look at it. I haven't gotten any feedback from him yet. But the information is out there and we asked the public to take a look at it. Tell us what we missed.
Yeah.
apples to apples.
Elizabeth.
The budgets from.
I'm not
those
saying that.
towns are- I'm just,
Not
yeah, the budgets from the towns that we referenced are public documents. I mean, you can look the budget up online and, you know, I don't know, Gordon, but I'm just
That's
saying.
not even almost apples to apples.
Yeah, but you can compare line items to some extent, you know, so we referenced, I'm assuming you referenced some of that, but yeah, looking at that, see what their operating costs are.
Thomas Darrell, anything else? Before we wrap up?
I don't, I think the next step is, to just, get it in front of each town's boards, and then they can, you know, if there's input from the other board members, if they've heard things or have questions or concerns, that's the next logical step, and then they go from there.
Where do we wanna have, so I'm trying to host it, I don't know that either of our meeting rooms may be adequate with both boards sitting in there, and I hope there's 3 times the people tonight that come to that.
Yeah, is this something we just look at the school to do?
Library?
PSB or Lincoln Academy?
You get school, the library,
See if maybe Lincoln can,
Lincoln,
GSB as an alternative.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll dig into that. And you and I will spend some time putting together a more formal presentation that delves into some of the details that I've heard concerns about tonight.
The agenda's online, folks, if some of you had come with some information, if you haven't gotten in there, if there's, you know, for some reason, inability to find some of the information or the cells are collapsing, we need to open them, just reach out to Kevin and I, and take care of that, you can see it. But at this point, it's all just supposed to be there for everyone to be able to see, and, we hope you do take a look at it a little bit closer.
Appreciate the turnout tonight,
thank you, gentlemen.
the comments.
Perfect. Anything else, guys? I'm good.
I'm good for this evening.
We'll
Yeah.
adjourn for now and plan on
You
trying to.
adjourn? Thank you all for coming. Okay.
Is this done?
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, Federal Rufus is up there.